So welcome to the Voice podcast, the voice of integrity, compassion and empathy. And with this episode, I have a lovely guest called Claire Thomas, who's a phlebotomist, or technically a professional vampire. And we discuss really how stress has a fundamental effect on our health and our well-being, how winter and how to deal coming to the new year, and also her journey, how she has come to where she is and chronic fatigue, and how she has healed herself through many modalities, looking at her lifestyle, her diet, nutrition, all as one. And hopefully you will get from this episode greater understanding of self and how to take those little steps that we need to make to break those patterns and to step forward more as a empowered being in one's health and well-being. Hope you enjoy and thank you for listening. So welcome, lovely souls. Thank you for joining me today on the Voice podcast, the voice of integrity, compassion and empathy. And I have a beautiful guest with me today, Claire Thomas, and she will be joining myself on the Infinity Health Hub as a way of promoting health empowerment through awareness so we can make some conscious choices to make some change. So, there's many choices that we can go to with our health, and I'd love to hear Claire's perspective, as she calls herself a professional vampire, because quite frankly, I can't say phlebotomy very well. So I've tried a few times and I've given up. So I'd love to welcome you, Claire. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Gemma. It's a pleasure to be here.
Perfect. Well, I think it'd always be a beautiful way to start is if you could go into your journey and what brought you to the work that you do. It would be fantastic to hear.
Yes. So we do have to go back a few years. So it's 2012. I'm sat in a GP surgery being told that I will never recover from chronic fatigue syndrome. My career as I knew it, so I was a pediatric intensive care nurse at that point, was over, and that I just needed to learn to live with it. Now, for anyone that knows me, I'm not very good at just living with things. I'm always, I'm curious, stubborn, or I don't know, another word was determined to sort of, see things differently. So obviously at that point, it was a lot to take in, being told that that's it. I loved being in children's nurse in pediatric intensive care. It was something I really enjoyed. And so it turned life on its head. And so there was a grieving process and a sort of, how do I reconfigure? And in the process, somebody gave me a book on nutrition, lifestyle, and biblical principles. So I'm a Christian, and so my faith is a really big component of my life. And so I started putting the processes into place, the practice into place. So I improved my nutrition. I really looked at my lifestyle, sleep, stress, movement, mindset. What was I doing? How was I feeding my body in multiple ways, in that holistic way? And I started to see little improvements that showed me how valuable it was. Now, I did have to give up nursing in intensive care, and I went into community nursing to allow myself that sort of time to recover. Fast forward a few years later, so I was in Scotland at this point. I moved back to Devon, and I really had a sense in 2018 that I was recovered. So it had taken quite a lot, changes in my diet, my lifestyle, my job. I'd done other things like something called the lightning process, which is grounded in neuro-linguistic programming. So it's that changing kind of mindset, neuro pathways. I'd done a lot more gut health work. There's all these things that I'd done to help the recovery process. But in that time, there was just this real sense that I didn't want anybody else to be sat in a GP surgery, basically being told there's nothing we can do. There's no, there was no medication. It was literally just get on with it. And you feel so lost. It's like, where do I go from here? And so this thought kept formulating, this thought to study nutrition kept coming up. But every time I tried to like look into it or think about it, it didn't fit. So in 2019, about 6 months before COVID, and this was actually quite valuable because they think swine flu caused the chronic fatigue syndrome. Swine flu and COVID are very linked.
Okay.
I found out what a nutritional therapist was, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. That's exactly what I want, because it's nutrition, lifestyle, and mindset. That's what I do, and the course that I did also allowed me to become an NLP practitioner, and NLP had been really valuable for me.
And for those listening, NLP, what would you class?
Yeah, so that's the neuro-linguistic programming. So that's the sort of changing the pathways, reframing, anchoring. It's all these things that help to ground you, to help you to see things in a different perspective.
So it's working in your subconscious mind. Yeah.
That's it. And then also within my work context, I'd moved into healthcare education. I had found myself in a job that was changing and I didn't like the changes. And I just had this real sense of I have to leave the NHS and I need to leave now. And I did. I took that leap of faith and I left the NHS, went back to uni, did a postgraduate diploma in personalized nutrition, and went self-employed. And then obviously COVID hit, but I meant that I wasn't in the NHS, and graduated in 2022 with just this desire that I really want to support other people not to be in that position, to increase their energy levels and resilience, to know how to nourish body, mind, and spirit. And then last year, the opportunity came back to become a professional vampire or a phlebotomist, because a lot of the clients I see need blood tests to look at what is going on behind the scenes. You take your car to the mechanics, you plug it in, you get a diagnostic review, which helps the mechanic with what they need to do. It's exactly like that with testing. I do other things other than blood tests, but obviously the blood test, we're quite underserved I'm in Mid-Devon, and this sort of area, even Cornwall, Mid-Devon, doesn't have a lot of access to private services. So I decided to kind of bring that and become a regulated clinic, which happened in December. So that's very exciting.
Oh, brilliant. Well done. Well, congratulations.
Thank you. Yes.
That's the journey, really. That is for sure. And it's how you've taken your own issues or challenges and actually decided, I need to change the messages here.
Yes, definitely. I think it's really valuable to know how to help ourselves, to empower ourselves with knowledge. And I know there is so much knowledge out there, and that can be overwhelming. But I wanted to be a place where, especially around fatigue management, women's health, nutrition, it was a safe space that people could come to start to figure out, have tools, and just feel that there is a way forward, not just I'm sat here going, now what? I'm going to Google it, and then Google just overwhelms me.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing. We go to doctors and there's certainly a place for that. But when
definitely.
you're told to just live with it, that takes totally your power away, isn't it? Your whole sovereignty is like, well, I'm just hopeless or helpless, which on a neural perspective, your nervous systems, that just puts you either in, well, freeze, which is not even fight flight. It's literally just switching off, which totally brings in more chronic fatigue. That perspective.
It does. I think the stress system, and that's a lot of what I see with my clients, in myself and my clients, is that, complete shutdown. And how do we support the body and mind to be able to feel able to move out of that I'm just sat, I'm frozen, I'm not going anywhere, into actually this is possible now. I can take steps forward. There is hope that, I can move towards some form of recovery or just feeling different, feeling better.
I mean, everyone's journey is different. Everyone's unique. But I would say, what would you see that sits behind chronic fatigue? Generally when you've got for yourself and other people. I know it can be quite large, but what sort of pattern do you see?
That's a really interesting question, because there are so many nuances to chronic fatigue is a blanket statement. We don't know what's wrong with you. You fit into a box of these symptoms. We believe it's chronic fatigue. Now, there's lots of things that can trigger it. It could be anything from surgery, infection, accident, an accident, something happening to your stress system. But what is behind it? So this is just my experience of what I've seen with my clients and myself. There's often the body is already quite depleted. Why the body's quite depleted could be a number of reasons. I see a lot of people with childhood trauma, with dysregulated stress systems. They've been in constant, type A personality, striving, people pleasing, disconnect from body and mind, not able to really sit into their body and look at what do I need, and just that ability to calm and switch into that sort of rest and relax state more. Is that on the go all the time? Now, I am just obviously speaking from my own experience of what I've seen, but I think because that stress system is constantly activated, that then impacts how much of the raw ingredients in terms of nutrients that your body is able to hold on to, because you use up more in that sort of fight, freeze state. And so you get more depleted quicker, so that if anything happens like infection, surgery, etc., it has a bigger impact because your body doesn't have the the resilience to bounce back because it's already quite empty.
Yeah, someone really cleverly mentioned this to me before, like your energy levels, a bit like your bank accounts.
Yes.
Generally on a day-to-day basis, we need to be working through the current account, what we need.
Yeah.
But if we're always tapping into our savings, our reserves of energy, we're going to be fatigued quite quickly. That will deteriorate. So it's really interesting because I know certainly from my perspective and the clients that I see, it is trauma. It is a lot of hidden trauma sitting within the system that is still kind of being fed through the autonomic nervous system. So it's still being fed. It's like having the batteries on, isn't it, in a car, or the light. But even though we don't necessarily know it's going, it's still happening. But it can come forward as a pattern or behavior that we have, like you say, the people pleaser, the constant doing, the cortisol addiction. I know I've had that, where I'm just
definitely
busy all the time. It's like, why can't I just be restful and peaceful in stillness? Why do I feel like I have to be moving all the time?
Yeah.
And the body eventually goes, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah. It just claps out, doesn't it? It just goes, no, it's the only way that I can stop you is to stop you like that. And it's going to do it. The body, the mind, they're incredible. The more I learn, the more I'm just amazed at what the body can cope with. But then it gets to a point where it goes, no, thank you very much. I'm not doing this anymore.
And it's more than likely, as I call them white flags. They've probably shown us things before that point, but we've just ignored it until it's literally in your face, like a brick wall, going, this isn't serving you anymore. You need to stop. And
I think it's fascinating, and I think again there is that element of disconnect from body and mind, and also recognizing what our body needs. So as I've been listening to I might not get this title completely right, the Ultra Processed by Dr. Chris Van Tuchelen. I forget what the full title of the book is, but in it he was talking about this experiment from the 1920s where they basically got these infants with various, I think he talked about one with rickets, and how this child with rickets would just pick cod liver oil because that had what that child needed, and how they had all these, the children would have access to these foods and they would pick what they needed or what their body needed, the nutrients. As a child, they haven't quite formulated the thoughts of, I know I need the cod liver oil. It was actually your body was like, no, I need that. And as soon as the rickets were improved, they stopped the cod liver oil.
That's incredible. I think we've sort of lost that innate wisdom in a way, hasn't it? And I think everything comes back to gut health, which is where that innate wisdom, as well as the heart, but that's where it sits. And we've just lost so much of that because we've been so much in our heads. In terms of everything we need to know is outside of us, and we must learn there's this innate wisdom that we need to remember.
Yes.
And like you've just said there, that's pure example of going with the instinct of what you need. You often will crave things, don't we? Unless
Yeah.
it's chocolate or something really.
But
Although
on that
magnesium.
note,
Mm,
magnesium, but not just that. Sometimes, if we're craving salty, sweet foods, that is also it might not be your body needs sweet and salty foods, but it's why it needs it. Sometimes it's because you are stressed, you've not slept properly, your gut is imbalanced. Do you know what I mean? It is still a sign of something, even if it's your body just giving you a warning sign of, look, something's going on here that we need to look at.
yeah, for instance, if you're low in salt, if you're low in sodium, you need that more in your blood. You know, yeah, it's like you say, everything is a message. It's just being able to understand
Yes.
that message.
And allowing ourselves the space, I think, to listen. We're so busy, and I'm guilty of this. This is something I know I need to work on, is not having my phone with me all the time. Having those moments of solitude and silence where I can just sit and check in with myself and go, right, what is going on today? And sort of help my body to get what it needs, and my mind. It's kind of it's a holistic viewpoint of it all.
No, I mean that's that's really important because this is it's about creating that space, and I think that's probably the first point that we need to look at is actually how do we break these patterns? How do we start this journey of creating a life of health, less stress, and what's more joyful? And it is that moment of breath, that stillness
Mm.
that enables us to ground and to connect and start trying to look at things from a different perspective rather than being on that hamster wheel because we'll never change
Yeah,
anything. We're constantly on that busy state, which is the burnout, the
yeah,
overwhelm, the
yeah,
fatigue.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we were before we hit record, we were talking about, Happy New Year. Here we are. And as I was waking up this morning, I was thinking, right, got to do this, this, and this. Okay, it's time to get started, start moving things through. And then the message literally came into me. It was like, no, Gemma, it's still midwinter. It's still midwinter. Look at the leaves.
Mm.
Look, the trees aren't doing anything, they're still resting. And we spoke about this. It's like, when do we what do we do this time of year? Is
Yeah,
it really healthy for us to
yeah.
just go, right, new year, come on then, off we go?
I mean, okay, we do have to look at where we've come from and where we are. But if you think about how it used to be before electricity and the flow of the year, they would be busy between spring and autumn, and then they'd sort of get to this time of year and they would sleep with, the sun would go down, they'd have candles. Okay, they might stay up for a bit longer, but they didn't have TVs. They didn't have sort of those screens to keep them awake. They didn't have bright lights, and they would just naturally rest. And then they would sleep longer because we have less sunlight, and then in the summer they would obviously sleep less because there was more sunlight. And
Yeah.
that was just the natural circadian rhythm. But we've sort of fallen out of that just with modern practices. That's, we've got more access to electricity, to light, to bright screens, and we're just on all the time. I think, when do we allow ourselves that natural step back? And I do like a new year. I do like that excitement of, okay, goals and different focuses. But I think if we're too if we put too much pressure on ourselves in January, February, where it's still dark, like, I don't think, actually, especially like massive fitness goals, do we really need to be thinking about them until at least March?
Yeah, I mean, because really, if you look at back at rhythm, actually, the new year starts at spring.
Yeah,
Spring equinox,
yeah,
Aries, the zodiac astrologically. So actually, we might class it as New Year now in the middle of winter, but it actually, from us, if we looked at our true natural rhythm, it would be March.
yeah,
So it's a great time to think about what you desire and what you want and sow those seeds, but you don't necessarily have to be it in action right now. Maybe it's more about aligning
Yeah.
what makes you feel good. What do you actually want? What makes you happy? Getting underneath those layers
Yeah.
probably first.
I'd say so. And then by the time spring comes around, you're in a much better place to actually properly start. I think, I read a statistic the other day where it said about 88% of people fail. They reckon 88% of people fail within 2 weeks of setting resolutions. And
Mm.
my thinking on that is, do we just expect too much from ourselves too soon? For most people, January is a difficult month. You've just come out of the buzz of Christmas. It's been incredibly busy, money's tight. And then you're setting yourself these goals, which, if we're honest, are they, have we set to a higher expectation on what we can actually achieve? And instead of, just saying, actually, I am going to make progress by taking little steps, we try and do it all at once. But our bodies and minds aren't in that place
No, and I
to do
think
it.
there's a huge amount of overwhelm. We're
Yeah.
still tired, and our minds are racing this way. But we've got to ask ourselves, why are they racing that way? Is it because there's a fear? Is there a should? Is there pressure that you're feeling you have to do things? You've got to kind of ask those questions of, is that really alignment to what I really desire? And do I actually know what I desire? Because I mean, I've had the question years put to me. It's like, well, I just want to be happy. And the question backwards to me, what would that be? What would make you happy? And I just sat and I'm like, well, I just want to be happy. It's like, yes, but what is that? And I'm like, well, I don't know. How can I not know what will make me happy? And I don't think we ask ourselves that enough. And it's getting under those layers.
Yeah.
And like you say, like a high percentage of people not achieving what they've set out to do. I mean, do they then pile on a whole load of guilt and shame and lack of
I sus-
self-worth afterwards,
yeah,
you know?
I suspect so. I think, if we look at shame spiraling, we then ended up in that place where you just tell yourself you're rubbish, you're no good. And actually, is it that you're no good, or you just set yourself unrealistic expectations? Actually, perhaps if you just took the baby steps until you felt able to take the bigger steps, that is a better way. I think I see this a lot. There's that all or nothing. If I'm not doing it all, I'm not worthy, I'm not able, I'm not successful. And we forget the value in baby steps. I love, the analogy of the tortoise and the hare, sorry. Where the tortoise just plodded along, the hare rushed ahead, but then ran out of steam and the tortoise overtook. And there is something about just taking it as we can.
Yeah. And
We
as soon as you said that, that felt, I can see the pattern that I've always had is where it's kind of a bit of a self-sabotage. It's very discreet self-sabotage. It can be
Yeah.
really about body dysmorphia. I hate my body, that's more obvious. But then you'll have patterns that you set yourself up to fail because you've come from a shame perspective and then you get the shame and go, well, that's just confirmation of me. I'm not worthy. We
Yeah.
self-perpetuate if we don't break that pattern. And we we suppress the joy in life.
Yeah.
That's what I've realized. When you're constantly on that go, you're suffocating joy.
Yes. And I think, and this is still for me, I do have to watch myself because I can get into that, do. But actually it's taking pleasure in the simple things. It's a sunny day today. I'm going to go for a walk and enjoy the sunshine. And I could say to myself, well, you should be working. And I'm like, but why? you know
Yeah.
I'm on top of my work. There's nothing outstandingly that's urgent. Going for a walk, and if we look at it from a research perspective, a 20-minute walk can increase productivity by up to an hour. So you might think I must keep going, but there is something about, I could go out and walk. It's sunny, I'm going to connect with nature, I'm going to calm myself, I'm going to move my body, which is what it needs. And then actually I'm probably going to be more productive as a consequence. But we don't allow ourselves to see that. We just see, I must keep doing.
Yeah, and this is what I see as the heavy masculine and feminine relationship. We're so heavily conditioned to be in our masculine energy, whether you're male or female, but it's that constant doing, being seen, being present. The Industrial Revolution, where you've talked about, we brought in electricity, well, we brought clocking in cards as well. You know, you had to be there for 16 hours. We have to be now, we have to be here more because we've got the accessibility of the internet and all these different technology. And it's just led us to become so separated to nature, to earth, and then we just haven't valued or put monetary any value to rest, to that, to the feminine, to the stillness, to the breath, because when you're in that, you're enabling yourself to look at what you then need to do. Am I in alignment again? And then you put your energies into what is really true to you, rather than just running around like a headless chicken.
And I get, you know, there's also the consideration that for some people it's actually really difficult to sit and be still, because for some people that I don't know if it's the fear of what's going to come up, or just
I know I had that.
Yeah.
I definitely had that. It's like, why am I always busy?
Yeah.
I would ask myself a question, and that was trauma.
Yeah.
But you feel you have to be busy because it looked like I could explain it as like a black cloud.
Yeah.
And I had to run quicker than that cloud.
Yeah.
So it didn't catch me up.
Yeah.
But that black cloud, eventually when I said, okay, it wasn't something to re-traumatize me. It was actually my younger self.
Yes.
Just wanting to be heard, wanting to be loved. And yes, I took on that emotion, but I processed. It was actually on a walk, a country walk, just allowing, she literally walked alongside me, and I was able to feel her emotion. But after 5-10 minutes, I felt so much joy afterwards. So walking like you is the step.
Yes. It's so that, and also walking where you can without your phone. Or if you feel that, you know, actually I want to take my phone from a safety point of view, as in, you know, something could happen, I could get stuck, and that's important to you, turn it on flight mode and just put it in your pocket. But don't listen to anything. Don't have a podcast on. Just have that silence and solitude, to allow yourself to start processing. And if it feels too big, just start with 5 minutes or a minute. Just say, okay, I'm going to just do 5 minutes. I'm going to breathe through when the feelings of overwhelm come up to the surface, which they will. I think we've got to allow ourselves to just breathe and ground. I like have you come across the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1?
Yes.
Yeah. So
please explain it though, because people listening.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I do get them muddled up. So if I've got them the wrong way round, never mind.
We'll go
So
for it.
5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Yeah. Thank you. I always get them muddled up in my head. But it's just that, ground yourself. And if you are still feeling quite overwhelmed and you've breathed, and then it's okay, maybe then pop something on if that's actually right now too much, because you don't want to overstretch your stress system. You've got, and if listening to something is a safety point for you, but it's just stretch it a little bit, breathe through it to help yourself put yourself into that rest and relaxed state. And then if it still feels too much, then put some music on or podcast.
No, that's really important, and it's knowing your levels, and having compassion each time. Don't have judgment of yourself, you know. And equally, I know for me, because I'm a bit of an impatient bugger, I was like, well, come on, let's just get this done. I want to get this healing so I can get on with what I want to do. It's just kind of like,
same.
I was like, no, it doesn't work like that. So it's layers, and that's how I try and explain it to myself and to clients. It's like the skin. If you can heal like the replacement of your skin, you don't actually feel it. You know, it's happening, you know, and every 28 days you've got a new layer of skin, but you haven't felt it. So actually make healing with ease and grace. And I always tune in and thank my body for having the discernment of, one is what is mine and what isn't, and to be able to, and two, what isn't serving me. and to release with ease and grace. Because if we think all of a sudden the body's going, ta-da, here's all your crap, deal with it. We're just going to go, I really
Yeah.
can't deal with this. It's just going to have to stay there. Whereas if we know the body's not going to try and hurt us, it's purely just trying to reconnect with us and love us. It's not the trauma, it's more yourself and the emotion you need to move through. And we know it's going to happen with gracefully and we can breathe through it. We know we can ride that wave.
Yeah.
Because we know it's going to finish.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think I did hear something once that sometimes we have to remind ourselves for the length of time we've been unwell, we've got to appreciate it could take us that long as well. You know, so for some of us, it could be the rest of our lives
They
that
say
we're.
like that with relationships, however long you've been with them, you've got to get over them that long for time. Like, really?
Oh, yeah, I'm not so sure about
Hopefully not.
hopefully not. But I think it's, you know, whilst it might not take that long, I think it's just reminding yourself that it's not an overnight process. I guess we hear the same term in business. Oh, they were an overnight success. Well, no, I doubt they were an overnight success. They've taken, you know, commitment, action for a long time. Some things do seem to happen overnight, but generally, a lot of people will have put in a lot of work behind the scenes. And
I
we have to
think it's the
do the same.
foundations, isn't it? I think
Yeah.
it's the connection. If you can do the foundations of connecting back to your body consciously through breath work, taking those steps like you're talking about, um, you're building that foundation back into your body. So where you feel that safety,
Yeah.
you're sort of taking that control back.
Definitely. I think safety is a big one. Your body needs to feel safe in whatever circumstances, well, everyday circumstances. There will always be times where you don't feel safe, and that can often be a warning sign of things that are happening. But in every day, we are constantly having threats. You know, even like notifications can be seen as a threat by our body on our phone.
Yeah,
And
especially
so
if you're
it,
already in overwhelm and you
yes,
haven't got the energy to just do general day-to-day stuff.
yes, and if that is the case, if you're finding like notifications are feeling like you're stressed by hearing a ping or you have to pick up your phone and check it straight away, those are kind of often signs of right, that's where you are in that overwhelm where you really do need to start thinking about how do I calm my nervous system down.
Yeah, and so I'd love to hear more about how you would help people
Yeah.
start that process of, so they're starting to recognize that this isn't normal because stress in itself has a very clever way. Our body keeps on upping the benchmark, doesn't it? To deal with stress. Otherwise, we couldn't even think anymore. But it's not until you de-stress that you realize
Yeah.
how stressed you were.
Yeah.
Because stress is a real big key factor that you work with people. How would you want to go into that a little bit more detail?
Yeah.
People can help through that.
I think generally, so this is obviously every client's different, but there's a sort of general way that I look at this. I start with low hanging fruit, as I call it. And often the easiest change for a lot of my clients is their nutrition. What are they eating? A diet that has you on what we call the blood sugar roller coaster. You know, you're up and down, you're grabbing lots of chocolate and crisps, you're eating lots of ultra processed foods. That puts an awful lot of stress on the body. So before I go too much into, you know, how do you reduce that stress, and I'm like, let's bring in principles of balanced eating, because when you're in that up and down, your safety officer is out with a megaphone quite a lot, as I like to call them. And so what we want to do is sort of help you get back into that more logical mode. And one of the quickest ways I find with my clients is by having more balanced eating. So making sure you've got a plate that has protein, complex carbs, fruit, veggies, you know, that's all going to break down at different speeds. So instead of the roller coaster, you are more balanced, you're fuller for longer. You actually find you think more logically as a consequence. You're not craving foods, you haven't got the brain fog, you're not like trying to just grab the caffeine, the chocolate just to keep going, and then you're then constantly on that cycle. And then once they're in that place of being able to be more logical and they can make the connection of, I made that change I saw that benefit. Oh, what else can I do? Then you can start bringing in things like, okay, well, let's work on your sleep. Let's work on movement. But it has to be like a step-by-step process. It could be actually, let's improve your gut health. Like, what else can we put into your diet to support gut health? But I think it starts with sometimes just rebalancing what you're eating. That
I think
seems
that's
to
the
be the best
platform.
thing for like most of my clients. Sometimes, like, I've had clients where actually it has a little impact, but they actually need to go and see someone to look at being more safe in their body. So looking at more sort of that inner child work or somatics. Have I said that right?
Yeah,
No,
somatic healing. Yeah.
somatic work,
Mhm.
all beyond my scope.
Yeah.
Looking at that more. You've got to kind of go deeper to feel safe. You know, so
Yeah,
every
and
client's
this,
different.
I mean, that is, beautiful, and it's it's interesting that you mentioned, okay, that's my scope, and this is what the idea of what I'm looking to,
Yeah.
creating here is that actually one person won't necessarily give you everything you need. And I'm getting an image now, it must be you and your low-hanging fruit and the apple, but I'm seeing myself at a market and I'm literally, there's different people that can offer you different things that will give you this whole everything that you require, but also work that calling you to seek within you. It's not about people fixing you, it's about
Yeah.
giving you the wisdom or reflecting it back for you to embody it for
Yes.
yourself.
Yeah. And I've always felt that within my messaging. I've always tried to be really clear that I want to empower, not help. All this within my nursing career, I would help. I would want to fix. I would want to help. But actually, I saw it. I could be guilty at times of disempowering people.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not what I want to give people. I want to give people tools so that they feel able to go away and support themselves, or then seek, other support from other people.
Yeah, it's really true about empowerment, and as I see it, energetically, we are going through this huge transitional stage individually and collectively to come into our power, to claim back our sovereignty, to recognize where we've given it away. That it's this victim, perpetrator, martyr energy that's probably the last layering for us to move through. And it isn't about anyone else fixing you. No one else is going to save you. And but there's lots of people that will love you in terms of that sharing of knowledge.
Yeah.
And
And I also think, like, I've read this a lot, that sometimes is it helpful to see ourselves as needing to be fixed either? And that notion of I'm broken. Well, how true is that? Is it that you are just a sum of your parts right now? Some of them you like, some of them you don't. And actually, it's not about fixing it. It's just about being curious, learning. Because I think if we're trying to constantly fix ourselves, again, do we end up in shame cycles? Because if we don't see it improve, we're like, oh, well, I'm rubbish. Instead of just going, this is where I am today. Am I the best that I could be? Maybe, maybe not.
or
But
maybe I'm exactly where I need to be right now. This
precisely.
often,
Yeah.
which brings in spirituality and your faith work as well, is actually we're already whole. We
Yes.
just, as a soul, as a spirit, as being, it's more about actually the healing network that we're doing isn't making us whole. It's about releasing the layers that
Yeah.
block us, anyone to see that wholeness, that
Mm.
fullness, that light, that your gifts, your talents. It's
Mm.
all. I feel it's the other way around,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. And I think, think of it like when you clean. I don't know. I used to do this a lot as a kid. Clean silver. You know how it gets really grimy?
Yes.
And then you polish it and it becomes, and sometimes actually, could we just flip everything on its head and just see some of our trauma experiences are just a bit of grime? that actually we're just removing, like you say, so that you can shine that bit brighter.
And also, when you can go through that work of trauma work, as much as you probably would choose not to do it if you
Oh
had
yeah,
to.
I would choose not to do it, but yeah.
But you see the blessing in it,
Yeah.
because then you recognize, you go, wow, my personality, like for instance, for me, with an abusive father, it was what I became was very empathic.
Yeah.
I could read the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah, me too.
And
Yeah.
now in my skill sets, in my work, is I can read the emotional state of that person.
Yeah.
And actually, that's a blessing.
Yeah.
This is where I think we're actually alchemists. We're our
Mm.
own personal alchemists if we become more conscious of that. I mean, yes, nobody would want any form of trauma or any form of
Yeah.
pain, but how can we, when you do the work, when you do the forgiveness work, when you do the anger, the rage, everything, it's like the whole digestive system has its own processing of emotions to work through. You can come to that state of forgiveness and then also see sometimes a blessing. I remember that being said to me once. I'm like, how
Mm.
the fuck can I see a blessing in
Yeah.
that shit right now? But you do the work, and actually, strangely,
Yeah,
it appears.
it's true. And I think it's with things like, especially anger and rage, it's important that we feel these things. They're not bad feelings. It's just emotions that we have. But it's how we like are able to let them go so they don't control us.
Yeah, I think we can get caught in
Yeah.
either suppression of the anger or staying in the anger. And I feel that that's really when it comes into as menopause, women coming through
Mm.
perimenopause and menopause, which is the liver and the hot flushes,
Mm.
and it's like there's so much rage in your system.
Yes.
And it might not even be yours. It might be what you've inherited through your
Yeah.
mother and your mother's mothers. And you look
Yeah.
what's happened to the feminine lineage. A lot
Mm.
of shit's happened. A lot of
Yeah.
suppression, a lot of rage can sit
Mm.
in our bodies. And I think menopause, and it's interesting because you've got very similar clients as well,
Mm.
is actually women to step up into that power. But they have
Yeah.
to move through this.
Yeah. It's almost like, I don't know, I see a lot of clients in that age bracket, and it's like they've suddenly given themselves permission to actually, I don't have to feel like this. I don't know if it's partly because of, culturally, we're starting to see a shift of, it being spoken about.
But it's losing the shame, isn't it? And it's losing the
Yeah.
stigma. And yeah, and I think women are really keen to, whether they know about it, but they're keen to do the work. And a lot of people that
Yeah.
want to try and do it as natural to their body, they're starting to ask the questions, what does my body need? What
Yeah.
are you carrying that doesn't serve me anymore? And
Yeah.
yeah,
And
it's a powerful time.
it is. And yes, it can be difficult to start, but again, it's just not trying to tackle everything at once.
Yes.
Just take your time, have grace for yourself. We're human, we get it wrong, and
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Well,
It's okay.
there's
And
a
it's
saying
okay
I
not
like:
to,
there is no such
sorry.
thing as failure, only learning.
Yeah.
Or only feedback, sorry, only feedback. And that feedback is a form of learning.
Definitely. And I often say it's okay not to be okay. It's just really giving yourself that
Mm.
breather
Yeah.
and from those thoughts that have you feel that that was probably the worst girlfriend you'll ever have in your entire life, or boyfriend, like in your head, that's constantly telling you
Yeah.
the stories. You wouldn't sit and listen to a friend that rocked up telling you all that crap that it tells you. So why am I even listening to my own? So it's really important. I think it would be, I know we could talk so much. It's really interesting, and we've only just touched the surface on
Yeah.
what's there, what you can share with us. But I really would love to get into the whole professional vampire. Like, how do you use, how, just on a, why would you say, why is it important to start reading the blood? What can it tell us? And
Yeah. I mean, we've been doing it for years, in nursing, in healthcare, it's a really valuable tool to sort of help us to see. And I think in terms of like nutrition practices, I just take a different perspective to say healthcare or GP would. And that's not because they're wrong or and I'm right. It's just a different perspective. So I just use it as we have clinically significant, which is mostly what the GPs will look at. Then we have suboptimal, and then we have optimal.
Okay.
So I'm often looking at the suboptimal. And for me, it's so I talk to a client, I get their symptoms, and then I look at the data of the blood tests. And it's just to almost, you can gain quite a lot of information from what people are saying about their symptoms. I can sort of gather, I think you're depleted here, here, and here, but the blood test sort of just backs up that thinking, or sometimes it could show something that I hadn't thought about. And it just allows me to see what is the body telling me. So the body's telling me this, but from what's happening inside. So you can tell me what's happening outside, but what's actually happening inside. And it's just more data to help gather information to create a plan. And I just think it's just another thing towards having more information, having that empowerment. And so sometimes with the suboptimal, I can say, well, this is where I believe the body's struggling. I believe that you need to eat these sorts of foods. Or if I think it's necessary, I'll say, look, you need to go on supplements for a few months. It's not all the time. I think we need to get as much as we can from food and understand how the different foods can help us. But sometimes it's just good to get things kick-started and repleted.
Yeah, because it's that catch-22, isn't it? If there's too much stress, then the body's not going to be absorbing anything, but then you need something to at least give you the energy to take you up to that next ladder, isn't it, really? You don't have to be on them all the time, but you need to move.
And it just allows me, like, when I see the data, I can just have a really good idea of, okay, I think so. For example, vitamin D, it's not tested so often in the NHS anymore. The general assumption is that we're all deficient and take a supplement from September to March is government guidelines. But sometimes I'm like, but I want to know how deficient you are, because I might suggest that you're more, you are quite deficient. So I keep within safe guidelines, but I'm going to suggest a higher level of supplement than perhaps the government guidelines do.
I mean, what is the government guidelines? I'm interested in this
400 IU per day over winter.
So that seems really low to me, because I was listening to other sort of therapists and things, and it's actually 1 hour of good daylight sunshine in summer is about 6,000 IU.
Depending on how you convert as well, but as a rough guide.
So again, it's about conversion.
Is your conversion, body... skin color, the darker your skin, the harder it is to convert. So that's where it's just really good to get a baseline sometimes. Because a lot of people do find just improving their vitamin D helps with all sorts, immune function just being one of them.
Yeah. Vitamin D, C, zinc, they're really important, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. And does the vitamin, so does all that sort of, I mean, I know C doesn't stay in the blood, does it? So for very long.
No, I don't test for C. So in terms of the ones that I tend to check for, I mean, you can go down the road of other testing. So just looking at blood tests, because you can do, I often do a urine test as well that covers, it's called an OAT test, so an organic acid test. And that looks at, bacteria, different vitamins, the ability to what we call methylate, which is taking the raw ingredients and using them within your body. But just in terms of blood tests, vitamin D, vitamin B12, folate, ferritin, are probably sort of the main ones around energy, or then iron around energy.
Brilliant. And because I know the guidelines that would, the GPs would have was quite a broad, like, spectrum of where you can sit in. And I don't know if that incorporates men and women as the same. I'm not sure, but is there never like guidelines that you work through in terms of actually the ideal thyroid is actually you're very low, or do you have your own sort of kind of parameters within those to look for?
Yeah, so I mean, in terms of levels, things can change day to day, But I do follow. So there's a lady called Kate Nola, who has written books from a functional medicine perspective, and that's where I was, looking at the suboptimal levels. And so where it's just, you can see things, perhaps, if you look at thyroid, generally in the NHS, they just test TSH. And if that's off or clinically significant, then they would do a further. I tend to look at T3, T4, free T3. So it's the behind the scenes work. How well are you converting? Because if you're not converting to TSH very well behind the scenes, so your TSH could be fine, but these figures are off. Well, actually, why are they off? And then it's sort of working backwards and just seeing, right, how can we support the thyroid? So is that it's under a lot of stress? Do we need to look at gut health? It's then combining with the symptoms to make sure that we've got the conversion there. So it's just sometimes getting more information as well than perhaps you'd get via the GP.
No, that's brilliant. And I've just got so many things of going rolling around my head. We can talk about this, we can talk about that. And it's just like, because we could have a podcast just on thyroid. And, for me, that could expand a throat chakra. Right now, we could be doing one about kidneys and the bladder. And we've kind of touched about it a little bit because of the fear perspective and trauma. But, what sits behind the adrenal glands. And so, yeah, I think it'd be great to be able to jump into these symptoms that we call it and how we can expand what's going on there if that's happening. So
definitely there is so much we could talk about.
I know, definitely. Well, I'm definitely going to have you back if you come back.
Yes, no, that would be my pleasure.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I mean, for people that want to reach out to you, what's the best way of doing that?
So you can find me at nourishtosoar.co.uk or on Instagram at nourishtosoar as well. So I have my clinic in Tiverton, but I also do mobile blood testing, and also I'm online for those that can't come to me.
Perfect. Well, thank you. This has been so interesting. And like I say, I want to explore even more. So perfect. So thank you for joining me again.
No, thank you, Gemma.
Take care.